Good afternoon, everybody. This is Weldon Jones coming to you guys from Sports Media TV Unfiltered. I hope you guys like the new angle that I decided to use because it took a very long time to actually set up this. So hopefully you guys like it. Let me know down in the comment section. But let's talk. So, unless you've been under a rock, you know the NBA playoffs have been going on, and one, if not two, three, or four of the second round teams have already been decided. And when we're talking about second round teams, as I actually refer to my bracket here, so far we have the Spurs advancing against the Grizzlies in 4 games. The Thunder have advanced past the Mavericks in 5. And the Cavaliers have swept the Pistons in 4. So we know those 3 teams are, as a matter of fact, going to the second round. Which brings up the next question. Who is going to advance next? If you have been watching the Golden State-Houston series, I think we all can agree that Golden State is going to beat Houston, showing how they outscored Houston 40-20 in the between the third and the fourth quarter after Steph Curry left with injury, which he will be gone for 4 weeks. So when we talk about Golden State, whoever else comes up in the next round, that might get a little bit interesting. The Clippers have lost Chris Paul and Blake Griffin, and I think at this point they're in danger of actually losing to a very relatively young Portland team. And I wouldn't put it past them to do so. Especially if we get another performance like we did from Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, as we did in Game 4 of that series, because that was quite the performance, and they definitely closed that game out in the best fashion, albeit the Clippers were very, very short-handed. But we're not going to discredit that victory at all. The Thunder beat the Mavericks very easily. If you saw that series, the Mavericks are also undermanned. They didn't have it quite as badly as the Grizzlies did as far as roster injuries and stuff like that. But believe it, they were pretty undermanned, and it wasn't really a great look for them. So, they got a tough break that series. And they played hard, They won a game. They didn't get swept, They didn't get the brooms put to them, so we can't say too much bad about them, I guess, considering their current situation, not having J.J. Barea a couple of games, not having Chandler Parsons at all, who is like their second leading scorer, I believe. Let me actually confirm that. Not second leading scorer, but he's pretty important. He's considered a star on that team. So, Chandler Parsons should be accounted for. And when we talk about the playoffs so far, it's definitely been a story of performances. If we look over to the East, the Eastern Conference, I like a lot of what we've seen there at this point. As far as the teams competing there, Toronto got up on the Pacers 3-2, and they're actually turning out to pretty much be on track to win this series, if you want to be really honest about what Toronto's situation is. I guess, Paul George might need a little bit of help here. Toronto's clearly the better team, talent-wise, all around, outside of maybe Paul George, who is probably a better player than both Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, but he is one person. So, Indiana might need a little bit of help there. And that could definitely be a thing. Now, Indiana could still possibly win this in 7 because, Paul George can get you a game if you really need one. That's what he's there for. So, if Paul George can do that, then we might be talking about a whole different series, because I don't like Toronto's chances when it gets to a Game 7. They haven't proven to be the most clutch team to me, and maybe that's just me looking from the outside in, because I'm not a Toronto fan. but I do watch a lot of NBA basketball, and I don't really think that they could close out a Game 7, especially if it wound up being elsewhere. But I think in this case it would be in Toronto. But they've already dropped a game at home this series, so they are liable to do it again. With that being said, Boston and Atlanta are in a very heated series. Atlanta has taken a 3-2 lead after routing Boston in a victory a couple of nights back. And this was following Isaiah Thomas's 42-point performance and Paul Millsap's 45-point performance in Game 4, I want to say. And that alone is a pretty big deal. So, I don't know what's going to happen with Boston and Atlanta. They seem to be back and forth. They both held home court. And it looks like, Atlanta, when they came back home, they took care of business. So, you can't really get too mad about that there if you are a Boston fan, because they just took care of business on their home court. And Boston will have a chance back in Boston for Game 6 to force a Game 7. And that should be a good series. And the winner of that series will probably wind up losing in the next round, depending on who they get. Now, Miami and Charlotte have been in a pretty tight series now at this point. Miami has taken their 2 games at home, and Charlotte has maintained to hold their home court down and win 2 games. The key here was big-time performances from Kemba Walker and Jeremy Lin, also known as Charlotte's backcourt, and they really delivered. That much is a fact for sure. So, I look forward to seeing more of that series. I'm still more favored towards the Heat winning this series just because of the experience that they have and the leadership of Dwayne Wade. And I think that's a little more impactful than anything Charlotte can do at this point. Although the series is dead even and anything could happen. And if the Heat so happen to not hit shots like they did the game before, when they gave up the lead and allowed the series to be tied, then we might be seeing a bit of a problem there in Miami Heat land if they continue to, not shoot well and kind of give Charlotte opportunities. But with this next game coming up, supposedly going to be in Miami, I think that Miami should be able to take a commanding 3-2 lead over the series and maybe even possibly close it out in 6. But I'm not ruling out 7 because Charlotte hasn't lost at home in this series yet, and I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think either of these teams are losing at home. So it could be Miami in 7. It could be Miami in 6. If something goes crazy, then it could be Charlotte in 6 or Charlotte in 7. But I just don't see that quite happening at the moment. I just don't see the playoff experience for Charlotte. None of those guys have really been in the playoffs like that. Kemba Walker, Jeremy Lin hasn't really been in the playoffs that much outside of a few times with Houston. But that could barely, count. Houston's never been a really good team in the playoffs outside of that one year they went to the Western Conference Finals, and that was under Kevin McHale, who is no longer there. So, that could just be an entirely different conversation there alone. And the lack of experience might come to play, especially in a Game 7 when everything's on the line and a lot is liable to go wrong. And, it's more of a back and forth. Both teams are going to be on top of their game. I think that experience is probably going to edge out in this case, especially this early in the playoffs. If you've never been here before and you're not as comfortable, you might be prone to make a few mistakes. So, that is my take on the Charlotte and Miami Heat series. Now let's talk about playoff leaders, because there have been a lot of great players this playoffs that have just really shown out. And if we want to start, we'll start with scoring. And I'm getting these stats directly from the NBA.com website. I have been watching the games, spoiler alert, but I just want to make sure that I'm giving you the correct numbers for the most part of the time. So, with that being said, the leading scorer for the playoffs right now is Paul George. He's averaging 28.8 points per game this playoff series, and surprisingly his team is down 3-2. That's very weird, but nevertheless, he is the leading scorer, and behind him is Kyrie Irving and then Kevin Durant. Both respectively averaging 27.5 and 26, and Russ is tied with KD, averaging 26. And then there's Kemba Walker, averaging 24.8, but that's, of course, the East. Whatever. As far as rebounding goes, DeAndre Jordan, Mason Plumlee, Dwight Howard, Hassan Whiteside, Kevin Love. Not really that important, I guess, but it's a lot of these guys, you had question marks by him during the regular season, specifically one Kevin Love as to how he would play during the playoffs, and it's good to see that he's finding a groove, and they're meshing. That bodes well for Cleveland going forward in the playoffs, and we'll see how far they can actually go with this momentum. Russell Westbrook is leading in assists. Surprise, surprise. Behind him is Reggie Jackson, then it's James Harden, and then it's Chris Paul and Kyle Lowry. This is very weird, but Chris Paul has kind of changed his roles for this particular playoffs. Now that he's injured anyway, we won't be seeing any more of him for quite a while during the playoffs if the Clippers make it that far. But when he was playing, he was more, score first, way more aggressive. He wasn't really, he was still doing the playmaking, but he was definitely taking advantage of the opportunities that he got to score the basketball. So to see him dropping the assist tally in the playoffs is actually just kind of okay, because that's what the Clippers kind of needed him to be, and that's what they're going to need someone else to be now going forward. We'll see who that is, asterisk beside Austin Rivers or Pablo Prigioni. And the leaders in steals for the playoffs are obviously Kawhi Leonard and Trevor Ariza, who are tied in first for steals per game during this particular postseason. And James Harden behind Trevor Ariza, Chris Paul, and Monte Ellis. Surprising to see James Harden on that list because he literally plays no defense whatsoever. And this is kind of funny. But he's up there on the list. He's leading in steals. So those are the guys that are pretty much leading in all the categories for the playoffs at this point. And when we talk about players to look at going forward, there's three obvious players here. You have Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and Kawhi Leonard. And obviously we're looking at these three players going forward because, well, they're going to face each other in the next round. And that's just that. They're gonna face off in the next round. Kawhi Leonard and Marcus Aldridge will face Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant as the Spurs face the Oklahoma City Thunder. So there are going to be some matchups to look at there. And the biggest question mark going into the series is, one, is Oklahoma City capable of actually closing out games? And then the other question is, are the Spurs going to be able to handle OKC's overwhelming talent between their dynamic duo of Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook? Now, I don't know how this is going to turn out exactly, but what everyone should know is that the Spurs have the runaway top defense in the NBA in terms of statistical production and all the categories. They are number one in the league in defensive efficiency, only giving up right around like 94 points per possession, so they're not even allowing 100 points per game. With that being said, that's kind of a big deal when you look at OKC, who has a fairly predictable offense. It's give the ball to KD. If he doesn't do anything with it, give the ball back to Russ. If he doesn't do anything with it, then give it back to KD again, and then somebody jack up a shot. generally what OKC plays like on a regular basis. And it worked against a depleted Dallas team because, well, Dallas is old and injured and they don't play very good defense. So, it has yet to be determined what's going to happen when they have to face an elite defense that's capable of turning you over and, you know, scoring points on the other end as well and making you play defense. So it's going to be interesting. And from the Spurs' point of view, you look at Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook and you think about it, you know, how are we going to deal with these two? Well, the obvious first answer is going to be you have two of the top perimeter defenders in Green and Leonard, you know, Danny Green, Kawhi Leonard, in your roster. So that's you definitely don't have any problems at least doing some damage control. But the question is going to be about team defense. What's the rest of the team going to do to make sure that Oklahoma City stays at bay? Because Oklahoma City's at their best when they're running up the scoreboard. Defense doesn't really win them games because they don't play it. They don't really play defense like that. So, again, one of those things to think about. I would argue that the Grizzlies play better defense than Oklahoma City does as far as just physicality and just being at the right spot at the right time. They were just lacking talent severely, but they were putting the pressure on. And they just got, you know, out-muscled by talent. And that could bode good or bad for the Spurs going forward, and that could bode, you know, good or bad for Oklahoma City going forward, because who knows, the Spurs could just stink it up shooting from the field, and they might not have to play that good defense, that great of defense to keep in this series. And it could be the other way around. So with Oklahoma City and the Spurs, you never really know because these two teams have had such a heated history. And when I say heated, they don't really have like any problems with each other, but they definitely have had an even matchup at sometimes, and sometimes it hasn't been even close. So it's very hard to tell, even though Oklahoma City is a team that's changed a lot, and the Spurs have changed literally little to none, because they never ever really do change. It's just going to be something to look into. It's just going to be something to look at, and you're going to have to just see it as it goes through the process. Now, my predictions for the next round, anyways, coming into, you know, this whole coming into the second round of the playoffs. I predict that the Hawks are probably going to finish this out in 6. Boston, my predictions anyhow, simply because the Hawks have just slightly more talent than Boston, and when it comes to a closeout game, that would definitely bode well. So I think the Hawks will close out Boston in 6, and they'll go on to meet the Cavaliers, and I think that series will probably end in 6 or 7 in favor of the Cavaliers. Now, if the Hawks can do some things right, we might be talking about a different story, but that would be very disappointing for one LeBron James, who has the utmost pressure on him to win a championship this year with all the drama that's been going on in Cleveland. So, that's one thing to worry about. Toronto and the Pacers. I think Toronto's geared up to win this one in 7. Not 6, 7. Because I don't see them closing out a Game 6 in Indiana. And I think that the Heat are going to wind up winning in 7. Because once again, I don't see the Charlotte Hornets closing out a Game 6 in Miami. So that's something to think about. And with the second round coming around, I mean, it's obvious to me, I think the conference finals are going to be the Heat and the Cavaliers, which would be a very great matchup if there was one Chris Bosh healthy. But there is not, so the Cavs would probably take this one in maybe 7. Because with Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade and the young pieces they have around them being more consistent than what Cleveland has for the most part, I think that Miami would actually have had a chance if Chris Bosh was there. Then we'd be talking about something interesting in the East. But since Chris Bosh is not there, he's injured, you know, so I don't think Miami has too much of a chance. unless something drastic happens and, you know, Cleveland just doesn't deliver, especially with the way they've been playing as of late. Not saying Miami can't win, but it's just a slim chance. But, you know, slim is better than none. It would be 50-50 with Bosch there. And then the West, obviously, I think the Warriors are going to go ahead and close out the Rockets, you know, tonight in Golden State. They don't really lose at home like that. I don't think the Rockets are going to still win at home. It doesn't really work that way. As far as the Clippers and Portland go, I think this one's going to go to 7 now because there is no Chris Paul, no Blake Griffin. And I think that the Clippers will close this one out, and they will have to meet the Warriors next series, and that's going to be a close series as well, probably deciding about 7 games. Now, so far, I have the Spurs over the Thunder in 7. And my first gut feeling was to say 6. But then I thought about it. I was like, Kevin Durant might win you a game. OKC might step up. You know, the bench might step up one game. And then Russell Westbrook will probably win you a game. And then the Spurs are going to shut it down. That's just how it usually works with the Spurs, especially with Game 7s. They're not really big on losing Game 7s. Outside of that devastating 2013 Game 7 and that one Game 7 versus the Clippers last year. But we can't really count on that because those were definitely anomalies and they probably won't happen for a very long time. So, I think the Spurs are coming out in 7. If OKC stinks up the joint, the Spurs are coming out in probably 5 or 6. But right now, as it stands, 7. Oklahoma City has given me reason to believe they can take 3 games against the Spurs, and that's kind of scary, but at the same time, I think 3 is the most they will take against an experienced team like the Spurs, who at this juncture is looking to send Tim Duncan off with his 6th championship ring. That has been the goal all season. So they seem a little more motivated now than they were in the times they lost Oklahoma City earlier in the rounds those years. And with that being said, we have, you know, the conference final of conference finals, Golden State and the Spurs. I have the Spurs coming out in 7, Stephen Curry or not. I've said this before about the Spurs and what they do. They've been here so many times that you can never count them out. You can never really bet against them. I don't care, you know, what the aberration is for that year. And that aberration for this year is Golden State capitalizing on what was a spectacular season last year. That's definitely an anomaly. That's definitely an aberration. It's definitely respectable. It's great. But at this current juncture, with the way things are looking in Golden State, with Stephen Curry possibly being out longer than expected, and even if he is back for the conference finals, he's not going to be 100% at this point for bad right ankle and an MCL sprain. The Spurs definitely can take this one in 7, possibly 6 if they play their cards right, especially since the main difference between the Spurs and the Warriors is Stephen Curry. And when you take that factor out of the equation, it starts to get really narrow as to how the outcome is going to turn out. And, you know, with Cleveland coming on to the finals, I think it will be a Spurs-Cavs finals this year. I think it will be. There's still a chance it could be a Warriors-Cavs finals, and if that's the case, then Cleveland has no shot. If it's a Spurs-Cavs finals, Cleveland can at least go to 7. Cleveland is not a superior team to San Antonio by any means, and they never will be, ever. As long as, you know, they have what they have going on there, they will never be a superior team to San Antonio as far as playing cohesively. Their bench unit is so inconsistent all the time, and the Spurs are the best bench in the NBA outside the Warriors. That's the main thing as well. Reserves are a big deal in playoff games. One player cannot make up for a terrible bench. That has never been the case. One player cannot win a series by himself. And that's what it comes down to with Cleveland in the finals. It's always been this way when LeBron plays against the Spurs, particularly. It's always been the Spurs strategy. They take out the rest of the team. They let LeBron get his points. They stick, you know, their best defender on LeBron to keep him busy, and they pretty much just, smother everybody else, stop them from getting their points. And that is where LeBron can be taken down, because LeBron is known as one of the best facilitators of our era. And that's how he wins his games, by having guys to pass to. But when you take away the guys to pass to, and LeBron is forced to score the entire time, well, then Cleveland's not playing efficient, first of all. So they're going to be missing a lot of tough shots, and LeBron's going to be taking a lot of shots, which he's not a high volume shooter at all. I mean, he can shoot in high volumes, but his field goal percentage absolutely plummets, and his efficiency goes down, which means they're giving up a lot of possessions. And that's where Cleveland is going to be in trouble, when they face an elite team defense that's going to take them apart. And that's going to be a challenge for LeBron. If he can win these finals, despite that probably going to be the Spurs' strategy going into the finals, then we can definitely look at LeBron and say something about his greatness. But as it stands, he might be going to the finals out of his element for another year in a row, because the Warriors pretty much did the same exact thing last year. And, LeBron can win you 2 games, but he's not going to win you 4 against an elite team. No one player can beat an elite team. And that's what it comes down to. So it all depends on the Cavs' play and how their bench is going to play. And it all depends on the Spurs' defense and how their bench is going to play, which their bench is going to deliver. Their bench has been nothing but money this entire playoffs so far. And that's yet to change. We're going to see the OKC series, and we're going to see that. So, with that being said, those are my playoff predictions and just a little update about the playoffs at this current juncture. If you want to be entertained tonight, definitely check out the Warriors-Rockets game at 10:30, and the Blazers will be playing at 10 o'clock on NBA TV. We don't have any East matchups outside of the Heat and the Hornets at 8 o'clock p.m. So, with that being said, guys, thank you again for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the new angle, because it feels kind of better. It looks a little better to me. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the new camera angle here. And I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks for watching.